Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 249. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're honored to have with us the inspiring and acclaimed author of Cracked, My Life After a Skull Fracture, Jim Barry. How you doing?
Oh, pretty good.
Pretty good. We're here to talk about the book that you just recently published called Cracked. This is about your journey that you experienced a brain injury back in 2012, correct?
Correct.
Talk to us a little bit about the book. It's been getting great reviews. You've had a lot of good reviews about it and how there's this level of just like inspiration and also just like ingenuity and fortitude seems to be the larger aspects of how the book goes along. And it's a really good memoir. We've seen a lot of people that have experienced traumatic brain injuries seem to really appreciate your story and are also inspired a bit by it as well. But do you want to first kind of we can talk about the book and the story behind it, but at what point during the process did you decide that you actually wanted to write a book about your experience?
I started like in 2015 and taking some notes with the thought of eventually writing something. And then I wrote the first version a couple years later, and then I revised it and added to it since then.
And so how did you decide, once you actually kind of put the draft together, how did you find Rootstock Publishing?
A friend suggested I start working with a writing coach. And so I had a writing coach in Woodstock, Vermont.
Okay.
And she actually recommended Woodstock. She heard some good things about it. So I thought, I'll give them a shot.
Right. And so how did that process work? So you actually reached out to them. Did they do like any like editing work for you? And did they help design the cover and all that stuff as well?
Yeah. I worked with a writing coach for like about a year. And then and she had some really, really good suggestions. And then once I submitted to Rootstock, then they had a few more suggestions, and they found like the cover photo and stuff.
And so talk to us a bit about now about the book. Now it's a memoir. It kind of talks about your experience of your traumatic brain injury, but so how is the book split up? It's my understanding that it's kind of split up into two parts. Like the first part is about your the actual injury and the rehab, and then the other part is about your life after.
Yeah, the book kind of paralleled my life. A lot was going on in like the first 18 months. And so that's the first part. And that's mostly chronological. And then the second part, since that time, things had just evolved much more slowly. And they were all kind of meshed together in time. I broke things up by topic in the second part once we get past the first 18 months.
And so how did that process go for you? Like what were some of the after the initial injury and then the rehabilitation process, how long did it take? Because getting a traumatic brain injury, the quicker you go into rehabilitation, the more successful one would get, correct?
Yeah. Well, putting it all down on paper the first time was kind of emotional and unisex. It's kind of therapeutic though, right, in that you have to rerun and rerun and rerun. And by the time you're done, it doesn't bother you so much. Because you're kind of used to details.
Right. Yeah. And so because before you were an engineer before, and you wrote a lot, but mostly like technical manuals and engineering pieces, correct?
Yeah. I wrote a lot of reports and proposals and stuff like that. And so I was really familiar with the writing process from that standpoint, less so from like a narrative point of view.
Right. Okay. And so how was it different when you're actually writing as the memoir? What kind of skills did you have in your previous career of writing technical manuals and stuff? Did any
Um,
of those skill sets help you in writing a memoir?
Probably the main thing that helped me, I wore a lot of hats.
Mm,
And one of the hats I wore when I was working, I was in charge of marketing for the company. And so
okay.
I wrote a lot of marketing pieces.
Right.
And so that was probably the most similar to what I did here.
And so because of that, as you mentioned, writing a memoir, how how hard was it to say, all right, I want to write something that I want to say, or do you say, I want to write something that people might want to read? Are those two things different, or are those two things the same for you?
I think they're pretty similar for me. There were a few cases where my writing coach had some good suggestions
Okay.
how to make it more engaging.
With that said, did you have to, when he's made you so, gave you some ideas, your writing coach gave you some ideas, did they tell you to either like make it more dramatic or make it a bit more readable,
Now,
or did you feel like you had to keep everything real in that
I,
sense?
the biggest single suggestion was I started the first couple of chapters
Right.
with a quote which kind of helped set the stage for the chapter. And she said, why don't you do that everywhere?
Mm, right.
And so I did that, and that really helped.
So as you put the book, as you put the book together, did this kind of give you some, as you said, it was really good. It was really good therapy at the beginning, writing it. Now, how much of this is also seems to be a bit of advocacy? Is it, you also see this as more of like also some advocacy pieces to really educate people on what a traumatic brain injury is
Um,
as well?
yeah, somewhat. The reason I wrote it was mostly because when something that has happened to you,
Mm,
um, you're all by yourself, and you don't really know other people that have gone through something similar. And so it's very useful to read about the experience.
so with that, there's also what you see is also, as we mentioned, the advocacy piece, but is there also like an educational piece? Because I know in the second half of the book you kind of talk about some benefits of some like mobility aids and some other
Yeah.
equipment pieces. Did you see that
Um,
as did you see that as being an important part of kind of pushing the story along?
of course, I had no experience with any of this
Mm,
until I got hurt. And so I tried to lay out a few things that I have learned
mm.
going through this process. I know everybody's different. There are some common things that everyone will have to go through.
And what are some of those, and what are some of those points that you noticed that you learned?
Things like, well, a friend asked me recently about wheelchair cushions because I didn't really know anything about them when I started
Mm,
out. And one of the problems I had initially was I tended to slide out all the time. And I depended on the seatbelt to keep me in the wheelchair. I bought another wheelchair for using outdoors, and it had a different kind of cushion. It worked a lot better. And so yeah, I learned that the cover and the cushion makes a big difference.
Right.
I'm sure the shape of the cushion makes a big difference to some people. For me, it was how slippery it was.
And so there are some of those stories that people will be able to look at and read inside your book as well?
Yeah. There's some discussion on that in the book. He talks about how I got cycling again and that's skiing and stuff. And so those are all things that I hope are useful to someone.
So as you said, like who would you say for this memoir, who would be the really good target audience? Would it be people that want to learn more about brain injury survivors, or would it be somebody that maybe general audience? So who would you see that would be the target audience for your memoir?
Well, all of us have challenges in life. They're all a little different, but the important part is to keep struggling forward. And so that's a message that everyone can take.
So talk to us a little bit about just like your writing process. So as you said, you wrote this 3 years after your brain injury. You wrote this, then you kind of rewrote it again a couple of years after that. Did you see did the first draft, did the second draft change dramatically from the first draft?
Not really. There were a few changes, but mostly they're pretty minor. Most of what I wrote, at least about the first 18 months, didn't change too much. Some of the other stuff did evolve more over time.
And did you see also did some of your experiences, because as we said it was 2 years after, did you add anything else into the second half of the book?
Yeah. For example, we had the pandemic.
Right.
That was a big deal. Cause yeah, I don't breathe too well. So if I caught COVID, it would be good.
Right. Right.
Um, but beyond that, um, there were some trips my wife and I took to visit people and stuff like that, and that informed some of the later stuff in the book.
Right. And so talk to us also about like your writing process, in the sense of when you actually sat down and decided to work on the second draft. Was it something along the lines where you would just work diligently all day, or did you work on like a few pages a day, or how does your writing process work?
Yeah. Well, I'm a morning person.
Okay.
So typically I work for a couple hours after breakfast. Well, I can't type anymore. I just use one finger now.
Wow. Okay.
And so it goes a little slow, but not too bad. Most of the time, you spend thinking, not typing. It might take me a month or two to get through a draft.
And so once that draft goes, did you have people that were proofread it, like your wife or anybody proofread it before you sent it out to some editors as well?
My wife read a draft. Mostly back in the old days, I used to proof a lot of things
Right.
myself. And now, not very good. Between the spell checker and the grammar checker and the software, and then, of course, my coach, and then Rootstock. There weren't too many, but there were some that wasn't to fix.
Because of the success of your book so far and getting a lot of good reviews on it, have you looked at trying to make an updated version or maybe a second book to it as well?
No, not in terms of like a memoir. I do a lot of fiction writing,
Okay.
but so far that's not for me
Right.
because I like that. Maybe someday it goes somewhere, maybe it doesn't.
Right. Well, that's good. So that's interesting. So what kind of fiction what kind of fiction books do you like to read or write?
Kind of mystery. It's kind of contemporary. Or at least what I think of as contemporary. The world as I knew it when I got hurt. Because things have changed since then. We'll see.
Yeah, that's exciting. So this is good, Jim. So so for those that are interested in learning more about your book, where's the best place they could go?
You know, if you go, well, you can go directly to Rootstock, and they have a nice webpage. It's also available everywhere else. Let's see. And at my website, JameBerry.net, there's link directly to Rootstock and to Amazon.
Yep, and you can order it. And like I say, you can, and we've gotten a lot of great advanced praise on it. It just came out January 31st, 2023. Correct.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
You should be able to come back on when you get your mystery book written and come back on and talk about that too.
Oh, yeah, I hope so.
So yeah, so for those that are interested in the book, it's a really good book for those that really want to learn more about surviving a traumatic brain injury and learning about the rehabilitation, and also just really reading a good an inspirational story. Definitely check out Cracked: My Life After Skull Fracture by Jim Barry. And as he said, it's available through rootstockpublishing.com, but it's also, please check out his story as well and everything at jamesjbarry.net. And all that information will be in the show notes. So, well, thank you very much, Jim. It was such a great pleasure to sit down and talk to you.
Well, thank you.